Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Paul Healy, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Principals Association. I'm here this afternoon with our Assistant Executive Director, Dr. Eric Eschbach. Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Oh, well, we're hanging in there, Paul.
So our wives kicked us out of the house the day before Thanksgiving. That's why we're here, right?
That's
They
right.
told us to get the heck out of the house, right?
Absolutely.
But in all seriousness, we wanted to come to you this afternoon to give you some updated information on the new mitigation strategies that were put out by the Department of Health and the governor, as well as talking about Senate Bill 1216 and the ramifications for that for school districts. So we're going to kind of dive in a little bit because we've been getting some questions over the last couple of days, and we thought it would be easier just to do a webinar and then you could watch it at your convenience.
Yeah, after many weeks of not much happening at state level, not much happening as far as legislation is concerned. This past week, things really got rolling with the budget, the remainder of the budget being passed, and then the new mitigation rules put into effect.
So why don't we start with mitigation first? I'm going to share my screen here and we'll start there. And so here we go. Bear with me a second. There we go. So just recently, the governor and Secretary of Health came out and issued some new guidelines for school districts and businesses as well, but we're focusing on the school environment right now. And this all came about because of the increases cases across Pennsylvania.
Yeah, this week, just again, just another explosion of cases around the state.
Right. So I'm trying to advance my screen here, and I just messed it up. There we go. So here are the new requirements. The Wolf administration is requiring all pre-K to 12 schools in the counties in substantial transmission for at least 2 weeks. So I just want to stop there. As you know, they've been following this tracking for a number of months, I guess, right now, and school districts and anybody, the communities, and any public person can go on and find out where the county is.
Yeah.
As far as the transmission. And we got away from the color thing to substantial, moderate, and low. I know some people are still thinking of the red, yellow, green.
No.
That's gone away. We're now substantial, moderate, and low.
Yeah, and ever since the end of August, school districts have been following these guidelines put out on a spreadsheet on a weekly basis every Monday to say what level of transmission the county's in.
Yeah, so if we just look at the counties now, and then they talk about its substantial transmission. I looked this morning and it looked like 63 counties are there. There's only a handful that are not been insubstantial over the last 2 weeks. And we believe everybody's going to get there sooner or later.
Yeah.
And that's why they push this out.
Out of 67 counties, when you have 63,
Yeah.
I think the most rural, remote counties are the ones the only ones left that are in moderate.
So here's the new guidelines, and we're going to kind of dive into the weeds a little bit on this. The first thing is now school districts have to commit to the safety measures that are in place and some of the new guidance on the safety measures to ensure the safety and well-being of the students and the educators. That's key. How do they commit to this? They're going to commit to this by a new form. Actually, the school superintendent and the board, the president, have to attest on this on a form that's developed by PDE that the superintendents actually now have. And basically they're signing off saying, we're following all the safety measures if we're bringing kids in face-to-face, whether it's hybrid or not, any face-to-face, they have to say that they're adhering to these safety measures. If not, and if they can't attest that they can put those safety measures in place, they have to remove to full remote learning without any extracurricular activities. And the new thing is that they have until November 30th,
next Monday
at 5 p.m. to submit this form to the Department of Education. And if they don't, my assumption, Eric, would be that the state would be saying you should be on full remote learning, correct?
Correct. The Department of Health, if this isn't signed, and if they find that you're still meeting face-to-face and haven't submitted the attestation form, which they're calling it, then they would mandate that you go to remote,
Okay.
fully remote learning.
So let me ask you, what's the difference from what we're doing now to the issuing of these new safety measures? What has changed?
Yeah, I think the only thing that has changed as we've read through this is a kind of a pinky swear, a promise between the board president and the superintendent saying, we promise that we're following the guidelines. We promise that we're following the face covering guidelines. We promise that that we're following the social distancing guidelines. And they've really taken out the words 6 feet to the greatest extent possible.
They took out to the greatest extent possible. Now it's just 6 feet.
Right. So I know there have been a lot of schools that have been meeting face to face, fully face to face with all of their students, that when they get into a situation, the lunchroom, for example, they're not going to be able to ensure that it's 6 feet, 6 feet apart. School buses,
Yes.
we know that 6 feet apart is not possible there. There seems to be the willingness to overlook those kind of issues, but we're still not sure about that.
Right. And somebody still has to attest to this, and we don't know if Mr. Tape Measure is gonna, end up at the school district and say you're not 6 feet apart, right?
Exactly, and that's a question that has come in.
Yeah.
Where are the teeth behind this?
Right.
I think the teeth come in if there's a report made to the Department of Health. The Department of Health comes in and reviews your strategies, your mitigation strategies. If they find that you haven't lived up to your promise, then the chances are that they could shut you down and put you into full remote.
So let's talk about face coverings for a minute, because, we've been back and forth on face coverings, and basically it hasn't changed too much, except to say that basically at all times you should have a face covering on. A face covering is anything that covers the nose and the mouth. It could be a mask, it could be it could be a shield, it could be a combination of things, whether you're inside or outside. And it still says, even if you're even if you're 6 feet apart now, they're saying you should have a mask on.
Right, and the guidelines for wearing the face covering have not changed. They're saying you should be wearing them. You should be wearing them inside. You should be wearing them outside. That hasn't changed.
Right.
It's just that they want you to attest to the fact that you're adhering to that.
Right. So I guess one of the positives for this that I see after thinking about this would be in some of those communities where the administration and the board may have said, no, we're going to do a hybrid model or a full virtual, but then parents came in and put pressure on the district to bring kids back. This kind of gives the superintendent and the board some teeth to say,
Yeah.
hey, we can't attest that we can keep everybody safe basically in what we're doing right now. So we're going to go full virtual, correct? I mean, that's one way to look at it.
I would agree.
Right.
I would agree.
And so let's talk about some of the other questions we have. One of the things would be, and we've gotten this question, we'll do the negative side of this. So let's say the administration says, hey, listen, we think we need to be full virtual, but then the board votes to say, no, this is the instructional model we're going to use, whether that's full, everybody coming in, or hybrid. And the question that we've had from our school leaders, what do we do about that when we're not in sync and we think that we're putting people at risk? What do we do?
Sure. I think one of the things that you can do is come together as an Act 93 team, work to put in writing what your feelings are about this, why you feel it's inconsistent with the requirements that PD and the Department of Health have put out there, and submit that letter in writing to your superintendent and to your school board.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We know that many teachers have talked about their own safety and their own health and have expressed some concerns about coming back to school. Administrators really have not done too much of that. They've been following the letter of the law and following what the board and the superintendents and central office have directed them to do. But there comes a time that if there, is not a meeting of the minds here, and they're not in sync with what the plan is, that they should put their concerns in writing just to have it on record.
Sure. Yeah, I think the other concern that comes out is what is my liability as a building principal to this? nowhere does it say that the building level administrator needs to attest to anything. But we all know that every month you're supposed to fill out a form about fire drills and turn it over
Right.
to the superintendent. That is not in place here. But do know this, that in the most recent passage of a school bill that went this past week to the legislature, and they approved and the governor signed off on, there is some protection here and some immunity from liability. House Bill 1737 made sure that school entities that act in good faith and comply with those public health directives cannot be held liable for harm or injury unless there's a clear and convincing evidence of gross negligence.
Right.
So put your mind at ease that that you're going to be sued over this, because as long as you're doing what you're asked to do, you're following the guidelines. This new immunity from liability will cover you.
Right. So, just to wrap this section up, what changes? We don't know. I mean, this is going to be district specific at this time. And you should be asking, and hopefully you'll be meeting as administrative team to talk about this new mitigation strategy that was put out by the governor and the Department of Health to say, number one, is it change anything that we're doing, number two, right now? Or number two, should it change anything? Because the school district only has until November 30th, which you said is next week, by 5 p.m. to say, we're going to stay the course, or we can't attest to putting these safety measures in place. So we're going to go full virtual. That's really the decision that school districts have right now.
I agree. I think some of the challenges that your superintendents are going to have is they're going to have to make some decisions for each school district based on the capacity of the school and the number of students that are in that school. Those who have gone to a hybrid model where there's half of the number of students in at a time or less will have an easier time and won't have to vacillate between face-to-face and remote learning perhaps as quickly as some of the others.
Yeah, and we do want to mention, even though we're not going to dive into this here, but you can certainly look those up on your own. There have been new mitigation strategies, for businesses as well. Even for our own business here, it was suggested before that if you could telework, you should, but now it's mandated on telework. So for our organization, we had to close the office down at this point until the cases go down. So we're not supposed to be in the office as well. So that'll affect businesses and restaurants, the numbers and all of that type of stuff is now, new numbers have come out for that, correct?
That's correct. But we're still available if you need to contact us by calling the office or by calling our cell phones, and those are accessible by visiting our website.
All right, so let's turn to some of the other things that are going to be happening around Senate Bill 1216. I know a number of you have been following what's been going on with Senate Bill 1216. It basically mirrors some of the things that happened in Act 13 late last spring. Correct. That covered the 1920 school year. So think about some of those same things are covering now the 2021 school year and even beyond in some cases. Yeah. So we thought we'd kind of run through those just to see if you're familiar with those, and if you have any questions, you can certainly contact us.
And for the most part, we are pleased with Senate Bill 1216. We wrote a letter in support of it. Yeah. We have some concerns, but for the most part, we consider this really a win for all of you.
All right, so we're going to do a couple screenshots on this one, Eric, with the different components. So I'll start with Keystone exams. So basically and it was signed into law by the governor right now as well. So basically it delays the exams as a graduation requirement till 22-23. Remember, the Keystones were supposed to be in place as a graduation requirement in 21-22. We were all gearing up for that. Now it delays it another year. It also says that any year in which federal accountability and testing are waived, it's not waived yet, remember, but if it would be waived, students that complete a Keystone course are not required to take the exam. And we're going to circle back on this one a little bit later about that federal waiver right now.
Yeah, and so and we'll wait to hear what the new administration will do with this.
Right. And then the third part of this one is that if a student is deemed proficient in these years, as long as the student has successfully completed the local grade requirements for the course. So basically says, you know, when we're not in the graduation requirement years, if they've taken the course and they completed the local grade requirements, they're deemed to be proficient based on the locally accepted guidelines that they have in place.
Yes.
So here's the question that we don't know. If you remember, as a school leader, the chart that they put out, the pathways that if you didn't pass the Keystone, how you could really still have a graduation requirement. And the first level was, Eric, that you could pass the 3 Keystones outright.
Right.
The second pathway to that was you could still pass by a composite score, taking into account that some people are good in math, but maybe not literature or vice
That's
versa,
correct.
but they have enough of a score to do a composite score. And those composite scores were issued before. And then there were other pathways after that, NOCD,
NOCD,
all kinds of stuff. So the question remains, and we've gotten this question, so if the Keystones are not a graduation requirement, do we need to certify graduation requirements for those kids in those other pathways?
Yeah.
What's the answer to that one?
Well, so for example, you have a ninth grader who does not have to take the algebra keystone this year because they're exempt due to this rule. But when they're in 10th or 11th grade, they take the lit keystone, they take the bio keystone, and in one of those, maybe they aren't proficient. Where does the composite score come in? How does the algebra score from ninth grade transition or translate into a score that can be used in the composite? The answer to that is we don't know.
Right.
We'll need to wait for PDE to provide some level of guidance on
Right.
that. We've put the question out there, and we're waiting for that guidance.
So on this one, just think of it, they kicked the can down the road a little bit here, and everything's on hold, and we're waiting for some additional guidance on
I
this one.
agree. Yes.
All right. You want to take teacher prep?
Sure, teacher prep programs. So this only applies to this school year. The secretary can waive the requirement for the special skills assessment and issue a temporary provisional certificate for those that are in the ed program. So that's the people that you're going to be hiring in the
Yeah.
future. It does extend the deadline for professional development for your paraprofessionals. So that's going to be important that's delayed. And then, that change that they're making to the special
Special ed.
ed certificate, that transition period is going to be extended for that to happen.
Yeah, we don't know specifically what the transition period is. It just said create the transition period. So that's going to be on PDE to create the transition period going forward.
I think the good thing with all of this is that they're looking at the fact that you are having trouble finding
Right.
people to staff your buildings, and they're trying to do some things to lighten that load. for
Right.
you.
Yeah, it does help to alleviate some of the staffing concerns that everyone's facing right now. All right. This is very similar to what happened in 1920, as you remember, that it waives the requirement to include performance data on professional employee evaluations. That would be for teachers and our school leaders, anybody that's covered under those. So there will be no performance data. So you would use the new form that was created last year for 1920 that did not factor into all of the elective data, the building level score, SPP, all of that kind of
Yeah, your
stuff.
4 domains.
Your 4
basically.
domains is basically it at this point. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing
That is a good thing.
going forward, and alleviates a lot of concerns and a lot of fears on the part of everybody else, and about student testing as well. And I just mentioned that, in 21-22, remember, they did make changes to educator evaluation. So we're still waiting to hear how that would be implemented in the next school year as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
So stay tuned for that.
This one, this is especially beneficial to our CTC programs. The NIMS and NOCDES exams, the secretary can waive those assessments on a school-wide or individual program basis. So that's important for our CTC programs.
Did they do this the last time too in Act 13? I
did
think
that,
they did.
yes.
So this is very similar.
Very
Most
similar.
of you would be very familiar with this one as well. So emergency substitute permits. What this law did was to have language that extends the emergency permit for those substitutes. Again, it's another staffing help who cannot complete the requirements of the permit due to assessment testing. And basically it extends this all the way through to June 30th, 2021. So until the end of the school year at this point.
So you have a person that has an emergency permit, can't take the necessary
Right.
assessment to get the full permit, and so the extension
Right.
to June 30th goes into place.
So you can keep using those until the end of the school
Yeah.
year, basically.
Exactly.
All right, testing.
Yeah, so this allows PDE to apply for that federal waiver that we talked about. We anticipate that with the Biden administration coming in and a new Secretary of Education, we anticipate that there will be more of an appetite to waive the testing requirements.
Mhm.
But we don't know that for sure.
Right.
There's no Secretary of Education that's even been nominated at this point, or even announced. So we're just hopeful that with a new administration, they would see the need to waive this throughout the country. It seems pretty logical to me. Seem logical to
Yeah,
you?
it does. And remember, this reflects back to the original screen about the Keystones, that if this waiver would go into place, then some of those other things for the Keystone bullets would come into play.
Just
here.
remember, politics is never logical.
Yeah.
So we'll wait and see.
All right, non-public transportation. This one has gotten a lot of airtime, prior to being in the bill, and people were on both sides of this issue. But here's the new thing. This is a mandate, remember.
Mhm.
It mandates that if a school district during the school year, this school year or last school year, to typically transport non-public students during the year, that they continue to do so during the pandemic or during this school year, even if they're not transporting their own students, right? So, and I know a lot of districts were kind of a little bit of upset about this one and say,
Yeah.
how does that make any sense? We're not transporting our own students, but we have to do this. But this was a type of thing where, the legislator says, there has to be some help for the non-pubs. They pay taxes as well, and this is something that they're getting for their taxes, basically, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And there is also a caveat in the law that that provides for the paying of
Right.
bus contractors, even if you're not running a full run with them.
Right.
So it is trying to provide some economic benefit to our contractors and to our bus drivers as well.
Right. And there's a piece in the law about subsidy for transportation. We didn't put that in because that's a business manager type of thing, and school leaders usually don't get involved in that, but that's also in the law as well. Okay, so that's what we have right at this point in reference to the new mitigation strategies, as well as the new Senate Bill 1216 that's passed into law, and some of the ramifications that you will see in your school district. And as Eric said before, as always, we're here. If you have a particular question, we've been getting some of those since this has been put out. If you have some particular questions, we would tell you the best way to reach us right now is, because we can't be in the office, is to email us. My email is my last name, Healy@paprinciples.org, or Eschbach@paprinciples.org, or email us both at the same time. We're talking still every single day as well. If you do call into the office while we're closed, we will tell you that you'll get a prompt to call my cell number. Please feel free to do that, and we will call you back as soon as we can, either Eric or myself. We're still taking those calls. We're still taking member issues, things like that. So please feel free to continue to call us as well.
We look forward to getting back face to face
Yes.
and to doing some regional meetings with you. We have our sponsors out there that are interested in hosting those regional meetings. Stay tuned. They'll probably be virtual for the spring, but we're confident that with the vaccination on the horizon, that we can get back to normal soon.
Yeah, and we also want to say from the Pennsylvania Principals Association to your families, we wish you a happy Thanksgiving. And more importantly, we hope that you and your family stay very healthy and safe throughout this terrible time that we're in. And hopefully we'll have vaccines soon and we can get back to some type of a normal situation in the very near future. And again, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.